Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Rising Tide Mastermind. The term mastermind was originally written in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. Before that, the earliest documentation that we have of a mastermind group was Ben Franklin's group that he used to meet every single week in a tavern that he called Huntus. Nation, there's no doubt about it. Life is too short to do it alone, and it's not very much fun to do it alone in. Nation, I urge you to go to scalinguph2o.com and find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you. I'd love to have a 15-minute call with you to explain all things Rising Tide Mastermind and see if this is a group that's right for you and you are right for the group. Go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of this amazing podcast. Thank you, everybody out there in the Scaling Up Nation, for listening. And I just want to do a shout out to some of our listeners. So if you are listening to this podcast and you are in Haley, Idaho, I will tell you that city gets the most downloads of all cities that this podcast gets downloaded in. So how about that? I guess there's a lot of water treaters in that area, maybe just a lot of people like this podcast. But if that's where you are listening to this show, the fine team here at Scaling Up H2O, they like to look at all the statistics to see what is going on so we can make sure that our programming is the absolute best that it can be. And for fun, they just look at that metric. Another metric is San Jose, Costa Rica. We have been in the top 100 downloaded podcast for years now. So I love Costa Rica. How about that? So if any of you are listening in Costa Rica, keep up the great work. I love that statistic. And hopefully, if you are at one of the conferences that I will be, that we will find each other. You can tell me where you listen to this podcast. And I would love to hear all about that. Of course, this podcast started, I don't know how many years ago, 2017 in April is when I started this podcast. I had no idea what I was doing. Somebody told me I needed to do a podcast, and I didn't know enough to argue with them. So I said, sure. I spent an entire weekend just watching YouTube videos and then making procedures on things that I was going to do. Yes, I'm that guy. I love checklists. I love procedures. And I read somewhere that you needed to make your first 3 episodes before you released your first one. Well, I didn't do that. I released my first one because I knew it took a couple of days for Apple to approve on iTunes what podcasts they were going to allow. So that was episode number 1. And you've heard me say several times on this podcast that starting this podcast series on episode number 1 proves how big of a fan you are of this podcast. That was me not knowing anything about podcasting. Since that time, I've gone to seminars, I've worked with speaking coaches, I devour any information on best practices around podcasts, and I truly enjoy doing this each and every week. And I've said this before on the show, but I'm going to say it again. Whenever you do something for the first time, you're not going to be good at it. And listen to episode number 1 if you need proof of that. But if it's something you want to do and you're consistent at it, you will improve and it will become more fun. I've met so many people because of this podcast. I have increased my knowledge about so many things that I thought I knew and things I didn't even know I didn't know, because I host this podcast, because of the research that I have to do when I talk to our guest, and of course, learning with each one of you with our guest as we have that expert on whatever we're talking about. So I just think it's amazing that you listen to this podcast each and every week. And, we started talking about statistics, and that got me looking at statistics. And they say there are over 5 million people that listen to podcasts all over the world. There's 5 million podcasts out there. And one of the statistics that we track is what's our global rank with that? And with global rank, they look at consistency. They look at how the podcasts are being shared, how they're being downloaded, where they're being downloaded. So out of 5 million podcasts, we rank in the top 3%. And I just think that is amazing, considering episode number 1 and considering all the things that we've learned along the way. This has definitely been a learning process. So Scaling Up Nation, thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing us to be in the top 3% of all podcasts out there and allowing me to meet so many people and honing my water treatment chops along the way. Speaking of improving water treatment chops, so many people are letting us know that they are enjoying the one-stop place to go to find out all the things that are going on in the water treatment industry. Maybe there is a conference that you want to attend. Well, that's very easy to find out. You can go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our events section, and we've got everything that we know that is going on in the industrial water treatment industry. And maybe there is something that you want to attend. Maybe you're a member of the American Chemical Society and you're going to be in Denver, Colorado, August 18th through 22nd. We're going to have all of that information for you about that expo, and you can decide if you want to go. And the great team here at Scaling Up H2O, they made it so easy. You can click to go directly to that conference website, and you can even put that in your calendar with different links that they have set up to make your life as easy as possible. Recently, the American Boiler Manufacturers Association had their conference in Denver, Colorado, and that was May 1st and 2nd. Of course, our friends at Ware Boilers are one of the big sponsors of that event. Well, actually, I don't know if they're a sponsor, but I know they do a tremendous job with the booth that they set up. They always have these great t-shirts. And one of the things that I heard as far as feedback is people are talking about them being on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And people are coming up to them and asking them about episode 318. That's when we had Richie Ware and Stephen Taylor on from Ware Boiler. So I just love it when I get feedback from other industry shows where people have been on this show and they are getting recognized for being on Scaling Up H2O. So Nation, thank you for that. Of course, it makes them feel good. It makes them know that people are listening to this show, and not only listening, but they are also learning. And that's what we try to do each and every show, is to try to entertain you, but try to leave you with more information than you had when you started listening to this podcast. And there's so many teams out there that are utilizing this podcast to enhance what their team knows. They are assigning podcasts, and I hope that's a good assignment. I hope nobody's dreading that assignment. But somebody on the team says, hey, let's go ahead and listen to this particular episode. And then I want you to take notes from that, and we're going to debrief the team together. And so many companies are doing that. I'm getting so much feedback from that. So thank you for using this show for all it's worth, making sure that we are carrying out the mission that this show has. And that's raising the bar in the industrial water treatment industry, one water treater at a time. So many people are helping us with that mission, and I have proof of that every time I get to talk with somebody out there in the Scaling Up Nation. Well, Nation, I want to make sure that you are in the know about all things. So with that, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence with our next guest. My lab partner today is returning guest, Beth Ziesenis. Beth, welcome back to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
It has been since we think 2017 since I've been here. And
Can you believe that?
no, I can't believe that.
So I'm looking back, and that was episode 41. That aired June 22nd, 2017. How hard is that to believe?
Well, we look better. I mean, they can't see us, but we look better than we did back then.
I'll go for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you and I met, I believe, that same year at the Association of Water Technologies conference. We were in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and you introduced yourself as our new nerdy best friend, and you taught the entire audience some apps of things that improved work-life balance. We just didn't have to do some of these things that apps could do, and I've received some great feedback from that show. And I can't wait to hear what some of your new favorite apps are today.
Well, I'm a walking appopedia, so let's do it.
Awesome. Well, before we get there, there's lots, I'm sure, that has been going on with you since 2017. So do you mind filling the Scaling Up Nation a bit about what's going on with Beth?
Well, if you can tell, my voice is coming from a little bit more southern atmosphere because we moved from San Diego to Nashville in 2018. And we went from a house this big, fingers just together like that for the listening audience, to a giant house and a giant yard. And turns out we don't need them. But we thought we did as a backlash. It was kind of our, what do you call it when you break a revenge boyfriend kind of situation where we just were like went overload in the opposite direction.
The Rebound House.
The rebound house. Thank you. Yes. So now we live in just outside of Nashville. We have about 2 acres. We have deer, which is not what we had in San Diego. So I love living here. It's so central. If anybody on the call is looking, if you travel a lot and want to move to a city where you can get almost anywhere in 2.5 hours, that is Nashville.
Nashville is one of my favorite towns. Let me ask, have you tried Nashville hot chicken?
Well, I've had it multiple times. However, I haven't been to any of the big names.
So Hattie B's is the big one, right?
Never had Hattie B's. I know. We tend to go to this place called Party Fowl, which it's FOWL. Get it? Uh-huh. And it's pretty close to our house. It has a whole bunch of varieties of the hot chicken. It's always rated in the top 10, but we haven't been to Hattie B's or Prince's. I kind of feel like we're letting everybody down.
You got to go there if you go to Nashville. Of course, you will be in line at both of those places, and I'm sure you're aware of that. Every time I go to Nashville, I try to go to Hattie B's, and it's normally minimum 40-minute wait.
Yeah, and Party Fowl, you just kind of walk in.
I'll put that on the list. And Nation, if you don't know what we're talking about, Nashville hot chicken is where they actually dip the chicken in hot sauce, and they mean it. It is not mild sauce, it is hot sauce. So if you order a hot style hot chicken, you're going to be feeling that.
And just another tip that doesn't make any difference whatsoever. If you go with hot chicken and you're a little chicken like I am, go for hot chicken and waffles. And so you get the sweet and you get the bread and then you get the hot chicken, and it's almost tolerable if you're a wimp like me.
There you go. So we've now concluded the culinary section of the podcast. Again, love hot chicken. Nashville, again, great town. So moving on, you have a business teaching people how they can use resources that are available to them, whether it's apps, whether it's artificial intelligence, and get some time back and work-life balance back. So let's start there. What is new in the world of all of that?
What has changed lately? I don't remember. How about the entire universe of technology on November 30th, 2022?
Well, what happened on November 20th of 2022?
Oh, what a great question. On November 30th, 2022, a company called OpenAI released something they called ChatGPT, and they only released it really as a research preview for the small group of people, including me, who had been paying attention to this whole different line of artificial intelligence, because we had artificial intelligence for many years in many ways. But what they did was this artificial intelligence, and you need to understand how it works to understand why we're here. This artificial intelligence draws on basically all the words that have ever been written. And then it looks at the probability that when you ask this question, this will be the answer. It doesn't draw on facts as a piece in and of itself. And one of the biggest criticisms of AI is that it keeps lying. I'm like, I know, because it doesn't draw on facts. They're fixing some of that. But anyway, OpenAI had been working with, millions of people, but a very small set of the world that knew about GPTs, and it's generative preform T's. That's what it stands for. That's the technical stutter that I do with that. So generative, they were dealing with a small subset of people, and they said, you know what, we've got this research preview we want you to take a look at. It's just a different way of interacting with this tool where you chat with it rather than just give a prompt and wait. And we were like, yay. And then y'all, the world, discovered it, and you broke it. Thank you very much. You broke it. Yep, that's my sad trombone thing, because it was the fastest growing platform ever. And it just blew up, and people are like, oh, well, it lies and it breaks down and you can't get on it. I'm like, I know, because y'all broke it, because it wasn't ready for prime time. So November 30th, 2022, OpenAI was trying to release it just again in kind of limited distribution. They didn't limit it to people, but just for the people who had been using these kind of tools, and I had for more than a year. And they opened it up, and then everybody discovered it. So that's one of the reasons that this is such an imperfect technology. And it is now completely out of the bottle. When OpenAI released theirs and everybody discovered it, all these other companies were like, crap, we've been working on one. It's not ready either, but we're going to put it out there because we don't want to be seen as not doing it. So that's why at this point we have these tools out there that we haven't worked out the bias issues and the trust issues and the copyright issues and the usage issues, the issue issues. So many things we haven't worked out because it wasn't ready to be released upon the world. And now that it's here, it's just being developed in real time.
I heard a speaker, I can't remember who it was. I was at a conference and he said, remember the old adage, trust but verify. He said, when it comes to AI, don't trust and really verify.
We're in that spot, but right now in real time, and I don't know when this is going to air, but even if it airs an hour from now, things will change. So right now, so many major developments are happening in real time. We have several companies that are exactly addressing the accuracy problem. And ChatGPT is built on, there's a line of information that goes back, right? There's a date that it has the information. But you have to understand that it's not built on facts like Google gives you facts. It's built on the probability that the next words will be this. So if you understand that, you understand the limitations of ChatGPT. And then if you get some of the higher levels of ChatGPT, like the paid version, for example, you can ask it to search the internet to verify things. But there's a tool called Perplexity. And I love saying the name Perplexity. Perplexity is made for facts. It searches the web, it gives you references, it gives you complete answers. And it actually saved the life of a baby hummingbird the other day.
Well, I have to know that story.
Somebody wrote me out of the blue because I had written a blog post about the difference between ChatGPT and Perplexity, which is ChatGPT is like creative for writing, Perplexity is for facts. And she wrote me and she said, oh my gosh, a baby hummingbird showed up at our, like ran into our wall or something and flopped down and was not doing well. And I tried ChatGPT to see if I could get some instructions. And I tried Google to see if I could get some instructions about how to take care of it. And she said, and then I remembered your blog post. So I tried Perplexity. And she said, Perplexity laid it out there for me, all of the steps to take care of this baby hummingbird. We followed the steps. The next day, the baby hummingbird flew away, happy as anything, and I'm sure lived a very happy life. But it's just a different way of getting the information. And again, by the time your listeners hear this, we could have 10, 15 things go up and down, exist, not exist. I said 10 or 15 things. I mean 10,000 or 15,000 things. And I'm not really exaggerating, because all these people are developing, because it's so easy now to develop your own GPTs and share them with the world, that I'm nerding as fast as I can, y'all. And it is hard to keep up.
I love that that's like the fifth time you've said y'all. You've definitely adopted the Nashville accent. Beth, James Cameron made sure that when we think of artificial intelligence, we think of Skynet and machines are going to take over, but now they're saving hummingbird lives. So maybe that's not the future we have in store.
So there's, I think it's called PDOM. There was a joke in the technology world, and I'm not in that technology world, but they talked about your PDOM score. And your PDOM score is the probability that you give to the idea that robots are going to kill us all. And it was funny because it was started off as a joke, and then it's not an incredibly big thing, but technologists and futurists, I'm a todayist, so I'm not either of those things, but they come up with this idea of how dangerous they think things are, and they call it their PDOM score. Like, you've got a PDOM score of 1, there's only a 1% chance in your mind that robots will kill us all. And some people are like at a 20%. And it's like, that's pretty bad odds. And none of this matters. It's not real statistics. It's kind of like ChatGPT. Let's make some stuff up. But it gives a gauge to how comfortable people are with where we're going. I'm probably a 5. I've got big fears today. And I hope this context isn't too far. If you publish this 2 years from now, I don't think it'll matter. But today I heard that AT&T is suffering a huge outage around the country with their cell phone service. And people are concerned, the first thought is a cyber attack and things like that. And they say, nah, right now they're saying, nah, it's not a cyber attack. It's just something.
Someone unplugged a cable somewhere. I'm sure that's all it is.
Yes. But I guess because my PDOM score is 5, these are the kind of things I'm like, yeah.
Well, with that in mind, are there some legitimate things that we should be concerned about? Are there some red flags when it comes to AI?
Again, we're talking about today in this hour and this minute, and there are several red flags that we have not addressed in this area. Number one is the accuracy. And I told you why ChatGPT in particular and LLMs, large language models, that's this whole category. They're built on the probability of the next word rather than on facts. And that is getting better. But the don't trust and triple verify, totally accurate here. So that's a concern that probably will be for a long time. Now, a lot of the people who we're talking to today work with other people, right? And there's a lot of privacy issues that are going on there. So we have to be concerned about the kind of information we're putting into these tools and making sure that we have our smart hats on to say, I'm not going to upload a database of our biggest secrets or our customer list or something like that into these tools until we're sure, because we're not sure where these things are going and how they're being used. I mean, some people out here don't even know there's a flashlight on our phones, right? It's hard to get all of the details in things that are going on, but that's why it's so easy for some of these companies to slip into their terms of service a tiny little line that says, oh, by the way, we're going to use everything you talk about anywhere we want to, and we're going to sell to you in any way that strikes us, all those kind of things. And they're written this big. And unless you painfully follow all of it, like I do, you're not going to be able to distinguish the good guys from the bad guys, because the really bad guys will make national news, international news, but most of them, nobody says anything about.
So Don't trust and really verify. And I think we've started this out to, if people are just learning about AI and they're like, I'm not going to go on that thing because I don't trust it. Maybe they feel that, okay, maybe I can use it in a certain way now. Let's give them some ways that AI can make their life a little bit better. And something that everybody out there in the Scaling Up Nation has to do is they've got to schedule, they've got to plan routes on how they're going to drive their day. Can AI help us with those functions?
There are multiple companies that are pioneering this type of AI management of fleets, of service calls, of routes and things like that. And a lot of these things have been around for several years. This is not a chat GPT come lately idea. So streamlining your operations can really be helped. Now, as you know, and as I think your listeners know, I am not an expert in your industry. So, and I don't usually go into enterprise level programs anyway. But what I suggest for every organization is come up with a policy so everybody has guardrails and guidelines for how to use these things, and ask somebody to lead the charge on AI potential and keep an eye on what's coming out, take a look at what the possibilities are. You need to have a leader, and I'm guessing that the people who are listening to this are more ambitious and more of a leader than some people who aren't. Congratulations and yay for y'all. You need to appoint a leader, an AI ambassador who will help keep an eye on what can help and keep an eye on what is coming up. Because again, it's happening so quickly. You can't just do a one and done and say, oh, well, this year we bought this. And so that's what we need. It's a commitment to keep up. And if you appoint a person in your office, if you have a small committee of people who are concerned about this, the people who are skeptics and the people who are gung ho, it's going to help you focus and make sure that you're moving forward.
Great advice for somebody that wants to write a policy. What are some things that must be in that policy?
So you caught me off guard a little bit. I have a cute little acronym on my website for a cheat sheet, but here are some things that you need to address. Training. How are you going to get everybody on the same playing field? Because right now you have people who are like, oh, well, I used it to do all of my work by 7 a.m. and now I'm going to take a nap. And you have people like, I don't know how to use it. I'm feeling uncomfortable using it and I don't know when to use it and I haven't been trained and that's something I'm going to need. And they're being very quiet. So you need to just address it and say, these are the things we want to do with AI and how we want it to help you, and we're going to train you. So that's one thing. Another thing is, these are the guardrails we have for using data. All right, that's another thing. Another thing that's important is these are the checks and balances that we want you to use when verifying information. And these are the disclosure things we want to think about when you're using this, because you've got a lot of people who feel ashamed. They're like, I use it at work. I feel like I'm cheating. You're not cheating. Let's give everybody the rules so that nobody feels like they're cheating their colleagues or they're making it too easy for themselves and they're not telling anybody. Like they feel bad. And there's this sense of mistrust right now. So having those guardrails, having an open policy, even if it's just a common sense policy. If you get the lawyers involved, y'all, we're talking, oh, sorry. No, y'all, you all. If you get the lawyers involved, and I'm married to one, you're talking pages and pages of gobbledygook. If you just talk to people and say, here are 5 guidelines that we can use to understand how we can use this and move forward, then you're going to be so much better off.
I think that's great advice because it's so new. People don't know how they should be using it, if they should disclose that they are using it. So I think that is just great advice. Well, let's jump into some of your favorite tools, some of your favorite ways to use AI and how we can save people maybe some time in the future.
I'm going to start off with a story that I haven't told because it just happened. and it made me cry. So I'm walking through the airport. It's late at night. I'm coming home. I'm walking through the airport, and I hear somebody going, "You're nerdy nerd lady. You're nerdy BFF. Oh my god!" And she's like calling at me from the side. And yes, I got recognized in an airport, which happens sometimes.
That's awesome.
And I this is way awesome. So I walk over to her, and she's somebody. It was in a program of mine, and she was going to her grandmother's funeral. She told me, it was late at night, last flight out, just found out, and she was sitting there, and she was using ChatGPT to help her organize some of her thoughts for the eulogy that she was going to give. And she said, I wouldn't have known how to do this. I was so, I'm in this emotional, listen to me, I'm crying. Has anybody ever cried on scaling up H2O? Yeah, I don't, probably not. But just the fact that she had an immediate tool to help her organize her thoughts. She wrote some wonderful things about her grandmother, and it was able to produce that. Now, let me go into a more serious conversation. Performance reviews, right? Anytime we have to write about ourselves, hateful, horrible. It's due in a month, let's say, and we put it off for 3.5 weeks, let's say, and then the last 3 days, we do almost anything else. And it's just been sitting there on our to-do list staring at us. And now it's the last day, and we've got to just hurry up and do it. And it causes pain, discomfort. ChatGPT, you can go in there and write a few sentences about yourself and what you've done and what you'd like to improve and your goals, or for someone else, those kind of reports. And you push a button and bang, you have a first draft. So immediately we had a personal connection where somebody used it for a very hard thing to write that was at an emotional time. And then we have something that is just heinous to write. So I always think first of the heinous things that we hate to do, how this can get us going. Another tool that has been integrated in with this AI that just has changed my life. This one's called Otter, OTTER.ai. And Otter, its claim to fame, and I might have even talked about it in 2017 because I'm sure everybody's listening to that one as well. But Otter used to be just, it would record everything you say and transcribe it live. And then you have the recording and the transcription, and it's all right there. But they have added AI, which means that now, as soon as you're on and having it recorded, it's making a summary of everything you say. It's pulling out every action item. It's pulling out every to do. And it allows you to immediately have all of these facts about the meeting. So you had a 2-hour meeting and had all kinds of things in it. You stopped listening 45 donuts ago, and it's hard to pay attention. Well, if you have these notes that are happening, you've got the real time. Zoom added it in there. Any paid version of Zoom has it. Teams has it now. All of these tools are integrating these immediate transcription tools that have also the ability to chat with them and go back and forth.
You mentioned Zoom, and they came out with an announcement, I think it was last August, September, that they were going to start using anything that was discussed on meetings to help create their future AI. Well, my antennas went up with that. Where did they finally land on that? And do we need to be careful what we're saying on Zoom now?
I remember exactly when the Zoom announcement came, and it was right before I was going to speak with an association of associations. And I was going to be speaking there, and there's a very famous guy in there who is very skeptical about AI. That's an official word. And so he is well known for being just concerned about AI inside industries. And he's in my session. Zoom had just gotten in trouble. Everybody was mad at Zoom. And he came up to me and he said, "You have to tell people about Zoom. You have to tell people about Zoom and the bad things they're doing." And I said, "They're going to backtrack. They're going to backtrack." And I didn't mention it. And probably right after the session, Zoom said, "Oh, just joking. We're not going to take your data. Everything's okay." And there are a bunch of people who are total watchdogs in this area, especially for very popular consumer tools that we have that watch those privacy issues. But we have to pay attention to the follow up. You mentioned that you had heard about Zoom taking our information, yet the backtrack may not have reached you with that information. So it's important to keep an ear open for the outrage and then the resolution as well.
So, in the instance for Zoom, because so many people are using that now, if somebody selects to use their AI feature, what does that mean as far as their privacy during that meeting?
So Zoom always had privacy. They got in trouble a while ago for not having privacy, and so they're pretty careful and they're pretty well known, so they can't make too many missteps. So I think, now don't quote me on this, and it might change tomorrow, so it might not matter. I think there's an opt out and an opt in, and I think they default you to opting out of having your data. And I think they say your data is going to be private. And I'm almost positive they really went conservative on that and said, just joking. And that's what we want them to do, is allow us to make that decision. So when you are talking to someone, it creates AI summaries. It's fantastic. It's so helpful, and creates AI summaries and AI information, or AI based, task lists and things like that, like Otter does. And you have the ability to control that. It is all yours. It's not being shared.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you make an excellent point. A lot of times people are really excited about the initial announcement, and then when it gets fixed, it doesn't follow through. So thank you for solving everybody's fears about Zoom. I know that was something that a friend of mine was talking about just the other day. Beth, you had mentioned there's a paid version for ChatGPT. There's a non-paid version. I know there's a 3.5 version, a 4.0. Can you walk us through all of that and what the differences are?
So, with ChatGPT in particular, the free version is fantastic for most users. When we talked about the whole situation with writing your own performance review or a job description, or getting, just some difficult communication, a good response for that. That's all easy to do in the free version. The paid version has some amazing capabilities. In your industry, we talk about analysis a lot, we talk about reports a lot. You can upload Excel files into there and ask for trends. I'm not an Excel person. I don't have a lot in databases. But the other day, I took all of my business statements, my bank statements for several years that I had downloaded for tax purposes, and I uploaded a bunch of them. And I said, tell me the trends about where most of my income comes in and when most of my income comes out, because I am I own my own business. I speak to 100 or so groups a year. And when do I mostly get paid and when do I mostly spend money? And this is not something that I pay attention to because I'm not a very good business person. I just kind of work. And it was able to look at all of those different spreadsheets at once and analyze and compare and contrast, and then give me trend lines. So that is in the paid version. Now, there are other tools that kind of meet those holes, but for $20 a month, that is a really nice benefit for me. In addition, you have features like personal GPTs. And personal GPTs, I mean, we know that they weren't ready for prime time because they named it Chat GPT, right? Worst marketing decision ever. But personal GPTs are that you as a company can upload your manuals, or you as an organization can upload all of your own stuff and your own brand and your own information, and give your employees access to that so they can get quick answers. So you're making your own chatbot that's specific to who you are. It's private, and you can make that if you have the $20 a month. Now, the problem is, as of today, as of this time, other people who are not subscribers to the $20 a month cannot see it. But I know that's going to change because they created this marketplace, and it literally has tens of thousands, because these are so easy to make, tens of thousands of GPTs that you can just use. But the only people who can use them right now are the people who pay $20 a month. So that's going to change because all the people who are making those want to make money from making those. So it'll be like the App Store for ChatGPT. So those are two major differences: is you can have use of these very specific tools, and you can create your own very specific tool. Plus, You have the ability to upload things, analyze things, use the internet to surf things. It goes much deeper. It's actually, curiously enough, much slower. So when you go into 3.5 and you ask something, it goes zoop, done. And when you go into 4.0, the paid version, and you ask something, it goes, I shall ponder this for a moment. It's the William Shatner, really, of GPTs, because it'll pause a lot more.
That's surprising because you would think the paid version would have more horsepower behind it.
Well, the horsepower goes to the thought versus the output. It goes more into processing the information deeply versus just spitting out words, which is what the 3.5 does. And again, it's very good for a whole bunch of different things. But if you want the more thoughtful version, I toggle back and forth between the two. And oh my God, it freaks me out. You only get 40 back and forths every 3 hours at this point. And I freak out. I'm like, oh my God, it's going to cut me off. And then I won't have any information ever again. And it'll cut you off and put you on the lower one, even if you're paying. So especially if I'm speaking and I'm demoing it or whatever, I'm like, we're gonna get to my limit, and then I'm not gonna be able to move. It's very stressful for me.
I was on LinkedIn just the other day and I saw about 50 ads for Chat GPT prompts, and you can buy people's prompts to help make your work life a lot easier. Do you have some favorite prompts that you can share with the Scaling Up Nation?
I'm going to change the conversation and the direction of this, and here's why. ChatGPT is the Commodore 64 of this industry. It was the first Commodore 64 computer, was the very first kind of home consumer computer that families bought. But if you had the Commodore 64, you kind of had to know what you didn't know to make it work. You had to be a prompt master, so to speak, with the Commodore 64. And so with ChatGPT, you have to be a prompt master. You have to know what it might be able to do to get it to do those things. What's happening right now is that we're getting the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobification, that's my own term, I'm going to copyright that, of ChatGPT. So instead of you having to know what kind of things are possible, they're being integrated into other tools you know and love. So you're just needing to push a button. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates said, you know what? Rather than making people learn how to code to make something bold and get into like hashtags and whatever, let's just make a button that says bold. And let's just give that to them. And that's what's happening right now is that instead of saying, oh, ChatGPT can make presentation outlines for me, you have just a few weeks ago, Microsoft released Copilot that's embedded into the Microsoft Office infrastructure. And they just decreased the price because at first it was insane. So I just bought it. It's $20 a month, believe it or not, just like everything else. And it is now embedded into Microsoft Word for me. So I don't have to come out to ChatGPT, play with ChatGPT, figure it out. I can be in Microsoft Word in a document and say, rewrite this or give me some ideas about this. I can be in PowerPoint and say, give me a PowerPoint about wearing PPE on the job site, and it will just do it.
A friend of mine wrote a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation using AI, and it was incredible what it came back with. The graphics it selected, the text it selected, the fonts, it really was stunning.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so we can talk about being a prompt master for ChatGPT, or we can wait a week and then have a button. And if your listeners are concerned about how am I going to become a prompt master, I wouldn't worry about that so much because it's we're getting the Steve Jobification. I may never be able to say it again of these tools so that we are just it's going to be a part of where we are, and we're not going to need extra skills to make it do what we want it to do.
And that is great news.
Absolutely.
Beth, we're talking today about how we can use AI to help our jobs. Are scientists and doctors using it to help theirs?
This is one of the most exciting areas of this type of tool. So back in the day, when you have scientists working together, they're in teams. They have to do a lot of research to see what other teams are. And they're looking for that eureka moment where they find a medication that does all these kind of things and they stumble upon it. By stumbling upon it, I say, I don't mean that exactly. They're doing tons of research. They're keeping up with everybody else's research. And they find a eureka moment where they're like, we have done this and we have gotten this idea and we put these things together. Well, these tools, these large language model tools, allow us to think about eureka moments way beyond our normal situation, right? So instead of having individual scientific teams around the world waiting for a eureka moment, you can feed information into one of these types of models. And they're beyond what ChatGPT is, they're different specialties. And they can come up with, if we combine the spit of a brown black beetle in Madagascar with penicillin, we're going to be able to address MRSA, that horrible superbug that gets in. I don't know. I've never had it, but it's a horrible thing. So it's coming up with different possibilities. It's not trying them all out. That would be really gross, probably, with the spit from that beetle. But it's giving people ideas beyond what they've been seeing. So it helps people move forward. In addition to that, with the capabilities it's having for diagnosis of things like cancers and problems in lungs, all these different things that we've relied on, some artificial intelligence to begin with, computer scans and things, but people's eyes and people's ability to see tiny little shadow in something. So we're getting to where we're augmenting those incredible skills by those incredible technicians with a second glance or a first glance using artificial intelligence to even give us more opportunity to save more lives, find things earlier, move things forward better, and have better outcomes.
And save hummingbirds.
That was a great story, wasn't it?
I love that story. Beth, if somebody just tuned in right now, and I sure hope they didn't, but if they did, what's the one message you want to make sure is perfectly clear about AI?
You've probably heard this before, but I'm going to say it again. AI won't take your job, but people who know how to do AI will move past you. And no matter who you are or where you are, you need to understand what it is, where it is, how it is, and you need to integrate it somewhere into your world. I don't really care how you feel about it. And I hate to say that because people have feelings. People are very concerned about different things, and you should be. However, you need to understand it and use it because it's going to be there every day in front of you and in front of, I don't want to say your competition, but in front of your coworkers. And if they learn how to use these tools and you don't, they're going to get more advancement and be more efficient and stand out more, and you may be left behind.
Beth, I think that's a great message. And I think the Scaling Up Nation is a little bit less fearful that the Terminators are going to rule the world, or maybe we're all living in the Matrix. I don't know. Which one is more fearful for you?
I don't know. The third Pitch Perfect movie was the scariest movie for me. I didn't see Terminator.
That's a fantastic answer. Speaking of answers, let's move to the lightning round. Now, this is your second time on the show, so point values are now double. Are you ready for these questions?
I'm ready.
All right, first question. What would you say your superpower is?
My superpower is bath time efficiency. I take 3-hour baths, and the entire time I am looking on TikTok diligently for trends and cat videos. Not many people can do that.
You heard it here, folks. What would you say the must read book is for our nation?
The book that I think everybody should read right now is called Future Proof 9 Rules for Humans in the Age of Automation. And it's by a guy named Kevin Roose. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. But he's with the New York Times. He's their technology guru. And he talks about how we need to prepare our people for jobs. What are jobs going to be looking like? The other day in an airport, I got my fingernails painted by a robot. I had them 3D painted by a robot in a machine in the back of a store in Oklahoma City Airport. And it was easy and fast. Now, you wouldn't think that a nail technician is going to be one of the ones that isn't future proof, but these are the kind of things we need to be aware of. So his book and his concepts are helping us through what are the jobs of the future, what are the situations of the future, and how do we fit in.
Speaking of books, I know you have some. Can you tell the nation a bit about those?
No, I'm not going to tell the nation a bit about those. And here's why. They're technology books, y'all. Move on. My books now, I've stopped writing big books. I mean, now, don't get me wrong. They're very good books and you should buy them. However, don't because they're out of date. And I've stopped writing big books. I just gave it up. And now my books, I'm going to reach for it so you can see and laugh at it. They're this big.
Very tiny.
And the reason is technology is changing so quickly. So I've written some very good books. Most of it, like good 10% of it is still valid. No, that's not true. Most everything in there is still valid. However, I wouldn't buy my technology books right now because no.
Fair enough. You do a lot of work on your blog, though. How about we replace the book with the blog? Tell us about that.
So, one of the things I've concentrated on in 2023, 2024 is getting the great information as it comes out on my blog at yournerdybestfriend.com and on LinkedIn. So, I encourage people to follow me on LinkedIn and follow me on my blog and my newsletter because what you need to do is stay abreast. And it's really tough for those of us in technology writing right now to keep up with everything, but I do my best and I do a whole bunch of reviews of the new technology and I welcome everybody. It's all free, y'all. Just come hang out, get some information.
Beth, final question. You now have a magic wand that can change anything in the entire world. What would you change?
Well, I have a kitty upstairs who is, it was an outside kitty and she got sick. And so we had to spend a lot of money and get her well. And now she's living in my husband's bathroom upstairs. We can't keep her for various reasons. And if I had a magic wand to wave, I would wave and find this kitty a home where she can stay inside now instead of being an outside kitty and live a happy life. And so now we've talked hummingbirds. I cried over a eulogy and I talked about my cats. I'm not sure there's anything else the nation would love to hear.
Well, maybe we can adopt a kitty for you. So, Nation, if you're looking for a cat, please reach out to Beth and she might have one for you.
Oh, I have a lot of cats, but this one really needs a home. Poor kitty.
Beth, I want to thank you for not coming on just once, but twice and being the nerdy best friend to the Scaling Up Nation.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Scaling Up Nation, Beth is so fun to speak with. And what you may not know is she is incredibly gracious. We had her recording scheduled when I and my family and pretty much the entire office was going through whatever was going around last year. And I was sick. Another time, I didn't have a voice. Another time, a family member was sick. And she rescheduled several times. She was so courteous to us during that time. Beth, thank you for that. And I think everybody will agree this podcast is normally better when I do have a voice. I guess it depends on who you ask. But Beth, you were delightful. I know a lot of people think a lot of different things about AI. And with that, I hope you've gotten some more information from this interview so you can make better decisions on how you're going to use it. I started out the top of this podcast by talking about how I started this podcast and I created procedures So when she was talking about creating company procedures around how to use AI, she was speaking my love language. And folks, I know most people aren't wired the way that I am, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't imagine writing something like that. But just imagine if you write something like that and if you train to that, now the entire team knows how to use it. And it's a level playing field, and we don't have to worry about going outside of those guardrails. So I highly recommend that you look into that. And we're going to have a link to Beth's webpage, Your Nerdy Best Friend, where you can actually look at some of the things that she's posted to help you create your procedure. She's got so much information around AI. And as you heard, she's very easy to understand. So I think everybody in your organization can get around how she's explaining these things. So I would urge you to go to that site. You can go to our show notes page. We'll click you directly there and just look at some of the things that she has to offer. She explains some, I think, complicated technology things in not very difficult ways. So it's a great way to communicate with your team. Speaking of communicating, if you were keeping score, we had a count of 8 on the y'all meter. So 8 times Beth said y'all. So she went from California to Nashville. She is fitting in perfectly. I don't think anybody would doubt of her Southern heritage, newly found, I might add. And then we also talked about Hattie B's and Nashville hot chicken. And we hopefully are going to get a sponsor for this show for Nashville hot chicken. I will say this is one of my favorite things on the planet. When I first started my water treatment company, I went out to visit with somebody in Nashville, and they took me to a Nashville hot chicken establishment. It actually was Hattie B's. And we actually started writing out what my potential business plan could be and how I was going to do all the things I needed to do to open the door to my company. And I guess that's where it just has fond memories for me. So Hattie B's is my favorite place to go there. That's probably the most touristy, if you will, but it's not bad. And they have opened one up here in my hometown of Atlanta. And as we were talking about on the podcast, they have all different types of heat levels. And I want to go through those heat levels with you. So just fried, no hot sauce at all is called Southern style. And then that elevates to mild, which is the mildest of all their sauces. That goes to medium. And then that graduates to hot. And it's not just hot, it's hot with an exclamation point. And then that graduates to damn hot with an exclamation point. And then their hottest version of Nashville hot chicken is called Shut the Cluck Up. Yes, I said that properly. And that has 3 exclamation points after it. Now, I have had that. And folks, they are not kidding when they say that is hot. And it's so hot, you can't taste anything else. You just have the taste of heat. And I promise you will sweat. I promise that your lips will burn. And you are going to feel that go all throughout your body. Yes, I said that. So if you want to try that, that's called Shut the Cluck Up. I normally get hot when I go, and their hot is probably like the hottest hot you will get at most chicken wing restaurants. So now you've been warned. I hope you go to Hattie B's, and you might go to a restaurant right down the street from where you live, and you might see Nashville hot chicken on the menu. We're always seeing that pop up as a culinary delight on all sorts of menus. So maybe that will be at a menu near you soon. Beth mentioned William Shatner on the interview. And of course, that is an homage to Star Trek. And I don't mind telling you again, I am a Star Trek nerd. And I don't know why I feel the need to confess with that. But I grew up with the Next Generation that was airing. And I went back and saw the original series, and pretty much everything Star Trek I have watched or read or whatever. I probably haven't read everything everything, but I am a Trek nerd, and I've admitted it to the Scaling Up Nation. And that's not the first time that I've talked about that. Of course, James McDonald is also a Star Trek nerd. He might be a bigger nerd than I am. I guess nerd is the theme here, since Beth was our nerdy best friend. James has actually done voiceover work for Star Trek fan pages. And I don't know, maybe we can link some of those to this show notes page if we can find them. But as you know, James is helping us each and every week make sure that we are honing those water treatment chops that we talked about earlier. So once again, here's a brand new installment of Drop by Drop with James.
Welcome to Drop by Drop with James, the podcast segment where we wonder, explore, think about, imagine, and learn industrial water treatment, you guessed it, drop by drop, together. In today's segment, we are thinking, what if? What if you sneak into your customer account, quietly do your service, and sneak out without seeing anyone? What if? You were quick, efficient, got the job done, and got out so you can rush off to your next account. What could be wrong with that? Think about that for just a moment. First, what about safety? If no one knew you were there, what if something happened in the facility? Would they know to look for you? What if you got hurt? Second, does the customer see value in not seeing you? I hope not. How does the customer know you actually performed the service instead of just making the report up out of thin air? There are so many positives that come from making your face seen and showing the value of you being there. Visit with the operators and buying influencers. Show that you care and are invested in the success of their water treatment program. I'm James McDonald, and I want to encourage you to be like water by forming bonds with those around you, dissolving new knowledge, and making worthy ripples, drop by drop.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you, Scaling Up Nation. As I said before, thank you for listening to this show. Thank you for all the people that are putting us on the top of the charts and listening to this podcast each and every week. People always ask, hey, Trace, how can we help you? And you can always help us by letting any water treater you talk to know that there is a podcast out there just for them. And some people, let's face it, you can't just tell them about the podcast. You've got to download that podcast player for them and install it on their app and set up so they are now getting Scaling Up H2O each and every week and subscribing for them. And I know there are a lot of people out there that have already done that. I'm going to ask that you continue to do that, because every time we add somebody to the Scaling Up Nation, an angel gets its wings. No, that's not what happens. Well, actually, we don't know. That could be what's happening. But what does happen is we get larger as the Scaling Up Nation. And that means that we've got more water treaters that we are helping, we are connected to, we are growing together. Nation, thank you for making that a possibility. And we'll have a brand new show for you next week of Scaling Up H2O. Scaling Up Nation, there's no time better than now. Why not get your Certified Water Technologist designation? And I know what you're saying. That is such a tremendous endeavor. I don't know if I can pass that Certified Water Technologist designation. Well, folks, I want to get you prepared to sign up so you have confidence to take that examination. And that's why we created the Certified Water Technologist Exam Prep course. You can get that by going to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep, where I prepared over 130 videos designed around a practice exam to help build your confidence and teach you the things that you may need to know on the Certified Water Technologist exam so you can be on the path to CWT excellence. Go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep.